Welcome back to the Lisbon Panther podcast. It's the 7th episode. I'm your guest host, Noah Carmen. Remember, we are always looking for your feedback. Let us know how we're doing. Last week's episode had several students, along with the distance learning education teacher, Rachel Bruce, who joined us and told us all about the program. This week, we have some very special guests. But before we see who's visiting, it's time again for the Panther Roundup. What's going on at Lisbon Regional School? This past week, students in K through 6 had a guest that visited virtually as part of the Year of the Book. Rajni Eden is a poet and songwriter. Students also got to choose their next book as part of the CLIF grant. Also on Friday, April 1st, the 3rd and 4th grade students went to Freedom for a Nature's Classroom program. Next year, the 5th and 6th graders will go to Nature's Classroom for their 3-day stay. Softball and baseball are in full swing right now, with practices mostly inside, but hoping to sneak out on a nice day for outside practices. You may have already heard the news, but Lisbon's Education Foundation is sponsoring a trip to New York City for all students in high schools. Students will be visiting the American Museum of Natural History, the Empire State Building Conservatory, and going to the Broadway performance of Hamilton. We are all so excited. And now let's get back to today's episode. As I said, today's guests are very special to the Lisbon Regional School community. We all have that favorite teacher or principal in mind. Who was or is your favorite teacher? Feel free to leave a comment. So today we've invited a couple of Lisbon retirees, Mr. Emery Younkins and Mr. Steve Sexton, and a couple of teachers that are retiring this year, Miss Sandra Roberts and Miss Sue Lucas. I'll let today's guests introduce themselves and let us know what they did or taught at Lisbon and how many years they did so. Ms. Roberts?
So I'm Sandra Roberts. Presently, I teach social studies for grades 5 and 6, but during my time here, I've taught all the elementary grades except for first. This is my 44th year, as I started in 1978.
Ms. Lucas?
Well, I've been a couple different people here in Lisbon. I started with the SAU and I did speech for 20 years and then decided to become a special ed teacher for Lisbon, and I'm just finishing out my 10th year. So it's close to 30 years at Lisbon.
Mr. Sexton?
Yeah, I'm Steve Sexton. I was the principal here for a total of about 13 years, 2 different times. I started in 1993, the first year that this school was open. I was the first principal here and was there till 1998. Then I traveled back to Wyoming and some other places, and then came back for another stint from I think 2006 to 2015, and I retired in 2015 as a principal.
Mr. Younkins?
Yeah, I started teaching in 1977, and I started teaching in Lisbon in 1982. I was a social studies teacher, did middle school along with civics, and then transferred to high school history and also taught civics. So civics was the one class that I taught all those years, and that was 33 years. I moved to town here many years ago and felt very comfortable in the community, and I've been here ever since.
Let's start by asking each of you why you decided to get involved in education.
So my grandmother was a teacher in a one-room schoolhouse, and I used to listen to her stories growing up, and then found that I just loved teaching others also, and especially enjoyed when someone understood something that they didn't understand before.
Ms. Lucas?
It was a surprise to get into teaching because my first degree was in art. So I was going to be a commercial artist, and I moved from Connecticut to New Hampshire, and I had 3 children. They were in school, and I started to help at a preschool. And at that point, after working as a coordinator of the preschool, I decided to go into speech and started out as a speech assistant and continued to get my degree in speech, and then continued from that into teaching, of wanting to see how students did all academics plus speech and how it impacted their academics.
Mr. Sexton?
Yeah, well, I had a cousin who was a math teacher, and that's what I started at. I was a math major and a physics minor in undergrad. And I had a cousin that was a math teacher and stayed some time with us when I was growing up. And he kind of influenced me to go into teaching. And after I got into teaching, basically what I wanted to do is make sure everybody knew that everybody can do math. I mean, sometimes you say math and it's a stigma. I say, oh, we can't do that. I've been terrible at math. It's crazy because everybody can do it, and I just wanted to show people that it wasn't that hard. It's pretty easy. And that's kind of where I got into education.
Mr. Youngkins?
Well, when I was in college, I was an anthropology major, and I really had my heart set on being an archaeologist. And I studied archaeology and I studied anthropology. And into about the third year of school, I realized that I had always had an affinity for trying to explain things to people. And so I got involved, not being totally sold on being a teacher, in the teacher education program at my college. This may sound strange, but after student teaching, I actually loved the job. As we know, student teaching is where a lot of people bail out because they realize they can't do it. But I did, and I stuck with education, and I bounced around a little bit trying to find a permanent job until I landed up in Lisbon. And so I suppose I wanted to become a teacher because I thought that's where my abilities were.
This question will be for our retirees. I'll start with Mr. Youngkins. How many years ago did you retire?
I retired 7 years ago. Since I have been retired, I enjoy gardening. I enjoy reading. I enjoy doing some yoga. I enjoy fishing when I get the chance. My health sort of keeps me from hiking mountains anymore, which I really used to like to do. I love to hike, but I can't do that anymore. But I still get out, and I try to stay active. And so that's what I've done. And reading. Read.
Mr. Sexton, how about you?
When I left Lisbon 7 years ago, the same time as Emery retired, and moved to Arizona. And when we got to Arizona, I did a little subbing, hated it. It was the worst thing in the world. I have more respect for people who sub now than I ever did before, and literally hated it. It was horrible. But after that, I did some tutoring. I got with a group and did some individual tutoring, and I was tutoring math, geometry, and algebra, and it was absolutely tremendous. It was great. I mean, the kids I dealt with in one-on-one, they wanted to learn, and it was really a lot of fun. Then after Arizona, I moved back to Wyoming. Wyoming is I kind of funneled back to Wyoming in all my years, traveling all over the place. And I got a job in a Sportsman's Warehouse, worked there until we left to come back here to Lisbon. So, and I really enjoyed that. I enjoy the outdoor like Mr. Youngkins, and so that's what I've done since I've been back here. I'm driving car for a dealership in Littleton when they need somebody to drive, and so I'm just taking it easy right now. Still love to get out, and I do a little piddling at the house and do some things. But that's pretty much it.
For our two retiring teachers, Ms. Roberts and Ms. Lucas, do you have any big plans for retirement, Ms. Roberts?
Well, I have lots of things in my mind to do. My husband's been retired for several years, so we'll be able to have more time to do things together. Like Emery said, I like reading and gardening. I like hiking. Also, I love traveling. So I like to visit new places, so I hope to do more of that after I retire too.
Miss Lucas.
So those plans are still in the works. One thing that probably people don't know about me, but I do love to fish. So instead of having to fish on the weekends, I'll be able to fish midweek. Route 66, I'd like to take that travel. I want to see the biggest ball of string. Some of those things that you read about and you don't think you need to know, but I need to know. And I have some classes. I'm going back into the arts, trying to get back into painting, doing some metal smithing, working with gemstones and silver. So that's what my plan is. We'll see what happens. I know sleeping beyond 5 o'clock in the morning is probably going to be my first thing to tackle. So thank you, Noah.
When you're on your trip on the 66, when you get into Arizona, right past Kingman, there's a little gold mine that's right on 66.
Oh.
You need to stop. And it's a gold mine town, basically. It's like an old West town. It's really, you need to stop. You know,
I'll have to put that on my itinerary. Thanks, Steve.
The next question is for each of you. How would you describe your time at Lisbon, and what do you miss or will miss?
Well, I can start. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time at Lisbon, I have to say. I wouldn't have stayed so long if I hadn't. And there's a lot of things I'll miss. I'll miss working with the staff, just miss the community in general. But I think I'll mostly miss the excitement of just being in the classroom, working with the students, all the activities we do, seeing the excitement when they get something, or I've done things like plays and all sorts of stuff. I know they're going to Nature's Classroom next year, and I was sort of thinking, oh, they'll be going without me.
Maybe we'll call
Now
you up.
that doesn't mean that you need to call me, but so I think it's working with in the classroom with the students that will be top.
Mr. Youngkins?
Working with the kids is probably, the students is probably the thing that I do miss the most. We all know that in the world of teaching, there's the world of dealing with students, and then there's the world of being in a school and the rules and the bureaucracy and the things of schools. I don't miss that at all, and I think everybody in this room is going to agree with me. That's the frustrating part sometimes of teaching. Now, the guy over here, Mr. Sexton, tried to make it easy on us. He did. He did. He gave us a lot of freedom in the classroom. But I would say that I miss, and of course, working with the co-workers, some of which are my best friends.
Mr. Sexton?
Well, I always said that this little school, a K-12 school, the way it's set up, is absolutely the best way to run a school. I mean, it's a family. You've got kids and seniors going down reading to kindergartners. I'm sure they probably still do that. And it's everybody that looks out for everybody else. Most people, when they think of K-12, they say, you can't put middle schoolers with kindergartners. You can't put seniors with sixth graders. And I totally disagree with that. It's a family. And it's a family with a staff as a family, kids are a family, everybody looks out for everybody. 3/4 of people are related to each other, so that's not too bad. But it's a great way to educate kids. And I really miss that. Every place I've been in a lot of schools all over the country. And this place, without a doubt, was the best school I ever was a principal in or taught. I miss that part of it, you know. Everything else, yeah, get away. Emery says the political part of the stuff, it's tough dealing with parents. In my position, when I was a principal here, that was probably the biggest thing that I had to deal with. Just trying to convey to parents that sometimes their kids are not perfect, you know, and they do mess up, and just let them take the consequence and go on with life. And that was probably the hardest part of the whole job. Everything else was fun.
Ms. Lucas?
So what Steve was saying is, for a small school in K through 12, we may not always have all the resources, but we solve the problems. And everyone is willing to roll up their sleeves and help you out, dig in. Working in special ed, seeing how the respect for all students in this school and their abilities, seeing the kids start in kindergarten and then graduate, and with skills. And when when they were in elementary, you're like, oh my goodness, how are they going to ever make it to 12th grade? And then there's this switch that happens, and then in the diligence of the teachers, and even within the rules, is learning, to respect some of the, the rules that we're going to need to carry into adult life, and they do it. So, and I'll miss, staff, the problem solving again, staff, and the kids, their resilience, and their humor. It makes me remember, you can't forget that you were young once too. Thanks, Noah.
How do you think things have changed over the years at Lisbon?
Oh, well, this is coming off the 2 years that we just have. We are way off on our scale of balance, and we're trying to get that back. Again, staff and resilience. I feel that students need to refocus on what's important. I think we have to learn to also, as staff, be more flexible with students, and understanding that socioeconomics and social situations are changing. So I think that's some of the biggest change, is where we are as a country, and how do we incorporate that and find the balance with students in school.
Mr. Youngkins, how do you think things have changed over the years?
How have things changed?
Please.
Well, I'm not necessarily so sure about the last couple of years, because I've been out of the loop. But I do know that from the time that I did start teaching, which was in a Catholic school and very traditional, I came to find out that over the years, we started to develop a way of looking at students, not as kids in a class, but as individuals. And I think that whether it was intentional or not intentional, or part of a bigger deal, we became more student-centered. And I think that that was something that we had lacked in education for the longest time. And so I'm glad that that's there. Not that that doesn't have associated problems, but I think that's what I see the most.
How about you, Mr. Sexton?
Oh, wow. Education, it's forever changing, but I think every time you start a new school year, it's different than the last, and you grow, and you try to make it better than what it is. And I agree wholeheartedly with Mr. Youngkins when he says we tried to make it more student-centered, at least while I was here. And hopefully a lot of things that happened while I was here are still going on. You never know, once you leave. I've been gone for 7 years, a lot of things change, and they will, they're supposed to. And it would be nice if I could look back and say, I started that program and it's still going on. You started when we were here, when I started the place back in '93. But if they're not, they're not, And I think the world is ever changing.
Could I add one thing?
Yes.
When Steve was speaking about the students and sort of being I like to think of this school as being a tribe. We know that as young people, kids will get picked on. Some kids are favored, some kids are shunned. And we know that in a lot of places that can hurt. Not that it doesn't hurt kids here, but here, at least, we're aware of a lot of stuff. And I've always said about Lisbon, you may not want to be where you're at in the pecking order, but you have a place. It's not like a lot of other schools where there's no place for you. There's a place for every kid here. And so that's why I like to look at it as a tribe.
Power of a small school.
Yeah, absolutely. And just little things like we're doing projects right now. And just this morning, I had some middle school and high school students helping their younger siblings bring projects into the class. You know, little things like that are just one of the things that makes things special too.
Mr. Sexton, I already asked you this before, after we got off the air for a second, but before 1993, before you came into the school, there was the bell tower. Were you here before then? You said you weren't. But...
I was here interviewing and everything basically the year before. It was early in 1993. And they were still under construction. There was a lot of construction going on. And even while we opened in 93, the construction was still going on. We had weekly construction meetings and change meetings and all things. So as a principal, being involved in that part of a school project was kind of great for me. You know, that was the third time I'd done it, because I was 3 other places in my career that they were doing building projects. But I was on not the first stage, but at least the third stage of getting this building built. And that was nice. Yeah.
And I had said this before when we were not on the air, but I can remember being in the elementary wing, which is still there, and bringing my, I think it was 3rd grade at the time, class up 3 flights of stairs to the library. And we also would have to go, for several years, we had to go into what was called the chicken coop for art class. And you went down through this little hallway. And I don't know if there was any heat in that hallway. If there wasn't much, because it was pretty cold. And the kids would go down through this little hallway to get into this room. And anybody that was there then, they'll remember the chicken coops.
Yeah, we used to have English class with Mr. Haywood, yes.
Well, when I first started, I think Mrs. Evans was down in there, and she taught art to some of the elementary, and that's how we ended up down there. So.
Yeah, they also put the new teachers down there who didn't know anybody. That's where Miss Woods learned geography. I remember that one.
So you spent some time in the chicken coop, Mrs. Woods.
So when they tore down the school that was up before this school, they kept the elementary wing?
Yes. So the elementary wing was newer. It was, I believe, a newer addition. So they kept the elementary wing, and it's still there.
Yeah, I think it was built in the 70s, I think. Yeah.
But they took off, as Mr. Sexton has said, they wanted to preserve one part of the old school. So they took the tower off, and it's still sitting over there by the annex. So that's where that came from. Yeah.
And the original bell is upstairs in the bell tower here. And I don't know if they still do. They used to ring it once you won a state championship. They'd come up there and they'd ring it as everybody came back from Plymouth or wherever we were playing at that time.
And I think I have a piece of an old chalkboard in my classroom. The classroom I'm in right now, there's one wall that has a little section with an old-fashioned chalkboard. So that must have come out of the old school. So I think there's little remnants of the old school still around.
Sure. You know, before my time, but you talk about going up to the 3rd floor, that's where the cafeteria used to be back in the day, long before us.
Yeah, that was before. That was definitely before even I was here, because I remember at that time when I started, I believe what they do is there was like a type of a gym, and I think they set tables up in there, didn't they, at first? So we didn't have our own separate cafeteria.
Why would they? Do any of you know why would they put the cafeteria on the 3rd floor?
Well, look, I don't know. You know, it's just the way it was. You have to remember that the old school was built in 1891. So
probably back then, a lot of people went home for lunch, and they didn't
probably
even
didn't
stay.
have a cafeteria.
Yeah, it was probably just if you stayed and you had your lunch, that's where you went up to eat.
Yeah.
I'm just guessing. I don't know that. But
How about an aha moment? Does anything stand out to you about that moment where you saw that light come out in a student or child's eyes? kind of like a turning point for them where they understood a question, something of that sort?
So I've had a lot of aha moments. I think teaching kindergarten, when the student can finally read a sentence in a book, you know, getting older, when they finally understand the process of multiplication or division in mathematics. In social studies, I've had students say, "Oh, I never knew that," you know. So sort of those kinds of things. But can I also, one of the things that you talked about possibly asking that I really wanted to mention was a funny moment or a funny memory. And I'm going to pull Mrs. Woods in for this. Because as I was thinking about this, I said, well, I definitely have a funny one. Mrs. Woods was in the first class I ever had here. And so we were doing the play, The Little Fir Tree, and I'm going to see if she remembers this. Do you remember the play?
Yeah.
And she was the little fir tree. And so during the play, 2 students were supposed to go in and pretend to be cutting down the little fir tree. And the whole idea was they went in, they brought this little sled with them, a little plastic sled. They were supposed to cut down the little fir tree. Mrs. Woods was supposed to fall into the sled. And then they pulled the sled off stage because they had gotten their little tree. Well, one time when we were presenting for parents, they forgot the sled. And so they're in there, they're cutting down the little fir tree, down Mrs. Woods goes, and there's no sled to fall into. And so the kids are all out there. This is 3rd graders. They're looking around trying to figure out how to deal with it. So Mrs. Woods just puts her feet up behind her and scoots herself off stage. So that was one of my first of many funny moments, especially doing plays. I think you get a lot of funny moments when you do plays through the years. But I often think of that. And so even back then, she was thinking on her feet.
Maybe the last one, and yeah, there have been plenty. At another school, I was at another school, and in my office, they filled my office with those little styrofoam peanuts, about 5 foot high, in my office. You know, that was funny. The last time here, they saran wrapped my truck. I was parked across the street there, and they saran wrapped the truck.
Senior prank.
Yeah. Had to put. One time they put a golf cart on top of it in Arizona. They put a golf cart on top of the administration building, and that one was fun to do. There are a lot of things over the years, you know. You never know. But I'm kind of like Emery. I was thinking about that same question. I'm saying, gosh, you know, we did a lot of things, and we laughed a lot. But, you know, to find one specific thing that really got out there couldn't really come up. We had a raft trip one time that was great. There was a lot of funny moments on that trip. You know.
I think that the aha moments are what keep all of us in teaching. After a period of frustration with students, or like Mr. Sexton says, sometimes parents, to see the eyes light up is indeed. I'll never forget 1977, St. Joseph's School in San Antonio, Texas. I had a little girl named Mary Brown. She was in 7th grade, and Mary had speech problem, and we didn't have speech therapists, or there was no such thing back then. And so the teachers had to work their best. And I'll never forget, and I can't remember the words, but I was trying to teach Mary how to make consonant blends, like blue and things like that. And she did. She said one of them. And she was so excited. I mean, her face beamed. I'll never forget it. Beautiful brown eyes, beautiful smile. I wonder what happened to Mary Brown, but I'm sure she's a success. So there was my aha moment.
Yeah, I think what really gave me the pleasure of doing when I started working with kids, when I would tutor kids before school and after school and math and things like that. And there always seemed to be 2 or 3 kids who kind of didn't fit in, they were just didn't have a group of friends, didn't have anything. And I can remember at least 2 or 3 that I was able to take them and talk them into to join the golf team and other things, like to join the fishing team. You know, we used to have a fishing team here too. And that gave me more pleasure because later on down the years, they would come back and thank me for doing something for them. And that gave me more pleasure than I think anything I've ever done. To have a kid come back and say, thank you, you really helped me through my school year. That was nice.
I agree that's something pretty special. I just had a student this year who graduated this past year who came in and said, I just want to tell you that, you made a difference and thank you for all you did. And it just really makes you feel good that you hear that back from them.
Yeah, I had a student that I worked with for speech, and he's married now and stopped in. And this was at the end of last year, stopped in and wanted to say hello to me and thanked me for helping him with his speech. But one of the aha moments was with a student I was working with and had trouble with their L's. So their L's were always rounded and it was a W sound. So it was Mrs. Wukas. And then I'd say we'd work on L's and of course they'd repeat Lucas and go Wukas. And then the one day it came out as the tongue lifted and it came out as Lucas. And they finally heard the difference. That was like a big aha moment and a smile on his face. So they're little, some of the aha moments are very small for some students, big for others, and big for
Right,
us.
exactly.
Absolutely.
I think back in 3rd and 4th grade, I actually had not that same speech thing, but I think it was with my W's. And I can't remember which teacher it was, but at some point I finally got it and I said it correctly. That was nice. And now I can say them correctly, thankfully. That was the end of the questions.
Yeah, so
I would really like to thank you for coming in today. We'll end this with what piece of advice would you give to future teachers, and also what advice would you give to students at Lisbon? Mr. Sexton?
Future teachers. Well, I can give one to future administrators. Always hire somebody smarter than you. And get out of the way and let them do their job. And that's probably the best advice I ever received when getting into that job. And I still believe it.
Ms. Roberts?
Well, I guess I would just say to do your best. To teachers, do the best you can in the classroom for your students. To students, just do your best. And that will get you through.
Ms. Lucas?
I think there's a few things. One thing is every day is a new day. It's a fresh start. When you come into school, the bell rings, it's a fresh start. And then Mr. Sexton, when one of the things he used to say was, if you don't make a mistake, you're not learning. Do you remember that, Steve?
Yeah.
Yep. And I always remember that and tried to tell students and think about it myself. We're not going to get it perfect the first time. We're not going to get it perfect the second time, but we're going to do our best, as Sandra said, and we'll just give it another try.
Mr. Saperchi actually, last semester, since this is 9th grade, this is the first time I've had math, math in 9th grade, he was talking about stories about Mr. Sexton, and I remember clearly that one story, what you said.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He also said that you actually just said this earlier, that you like the way that the K through 12 school works, the system. Yeah, I said that to us.
Didn't you also, Steve, say something to the effect we can disagree but not be disagreeable?
Yeah.
I think that's another one of yours.
I had a few sayings.
You did have a few.
They were posted on your wall in your
Yeah,
office.
I had a
Yes.
bunch of them.
Or we'd all know about it. Be in our box. Our
I like
mailbox.
the one. And then there was another one. If you're not making waves, you're not moving. And another one was make somebody's day. The fish philosophy.
Oh, yeah.
Make somebody's day. And probably the best one is be there when you're talking to somebody, listening to somebody. Listen and don't be thinking about how you're going to respond before they're done. That's stayed with me forever, I think. Because if you're a good listener, you'll come across as a smarter person, guaranteed. And you'll become a better person yourself by doing that. That's a little advice for you.
I think I need that. Mr. Youngkin?
For future teachers, we need to have them understand that teaching is a difficult job. And that's why you have, in the world of teaching in general, a high turnover of teachers, because a lot of people have difficulty sticking with it. But if you respect young people, that's the first thing, to respect them and not expect them to just respect you walking into a classroom. You need to respect them. That's my first advice to any young teacher, and you may have to swallow your pride a little bit at the beginning, but in order to get respect, you have to give it. And that's what I've told anybody who ever wants to go into teaching.
But with that, my name is Noah, and thank you to our guests and listeners for joining us today. Next week's episode will have guests from 5th and 6th grade. They recently completed their Around the World Country project, so we will get to hear all about it. Remember, episodes are released every Monday. We'd like to give another shout out to the Lisbon Education Foundation for not only purchasing the microphones, but also the headphones for the podcast. If you'd like to donate to the Education Foundation, you can find information on the school's website.